Hello Serie A fan. Pirlo saves his bacon this week, while Milan make a pig's ear of it. Elsewhere, Serie A clubs are in streaky form as Roma stumble in the league, but experience an Amsterdam high. Napoli win and lose, while Inter just keep grinding out those wins. We talk about all that, plus finally make a ham-fisted attempt at answering a listener's question on this episode of Scudetto. Hello and welcome back to Scudetto, your weekly roundup of Italian football. Been a week of kind of mixed fortunes for most of the clubs in Serie A, which made good week, bad week a bit of a challenge, as you'll find out shortly. But we do still have one Italian club in European competition. Roma are actually currently playing against Ajax in the Europa League quarter-final, so we will catch up on that one towards the end of the pod. Plenty to speak about before that, but first, let's catch up with the squad. Kenny, I think it's your turn to go first this week. How are you getting on, first of all?
I'm doing okay. Thanks, Oscar. I don't really have a story per se. I did what I imagine quite a lot of people did over the weekend, which was just eat lots of chocolate. The weather's been kind of crazy here. We had summer, basically, on Saturday, and it's been snowing a little bit since then. So good weather to sit inside and eat chocolate.
Yeah, it's been the same here, although it's not so unexpected for this time of the year to have a bit of snow in Helsinki. But it's also been very nice and sunny at times, which means I've been getting out and about, which I'll tell you more about in my story. But first of all, Kenny, you're holding up a beer. What sort of beer is that? Looks familiar.
Yes, I've gone back to North London's Beavertown brewery. This one is a Bloody L, which I think is one of their few regular staples that I haven't actually had yet. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's a Blood Orange IPA, and it's a 5.5%er, so it's weak by Boaz's standards, relatively strong by my standards.
Nice. Yeah, actually, with your fruity beer last week as well, you got me in a bit of a kind of spring mood. I thought I'd go for something similar. I picked up a mango chili Nordic sour, so kind of gone a bit overboard. But
that sounds interesting.
It does sound interesting. I haven't tried it yet, but I'll let you know how it goes down.
I enjoyed my beer with chili in it, so...
Oh yeah, I forgot you had a chili beer as well. When I was drinking the non-alcoholic, the ginger beers, some of those were quite spicy, which I enjoyed, so bodes well. Buzz, have you got anything to contribute to the beer discussion this week?
For the beer discussion, I'm going to surprise Kenny, and I think for the first time ever, I'm below him in terms of alcohol. My one is a 4.5%, and it's a Mahu, I believe you call it, Session IPA. I want to see what all the fuss is about.
Is that the Spanish one?
Yep.
Yeah, it's the only lager that I ever see advertised in Spain, or that I ever buy in the supermarkets there.
I didn't even realize it was a 4.5. Otherwise, I might have not even picked it up, but maybe it will surprise me. And with regards to a story, I actually just saw a gig. One of my more wealthy neighbors has a big garden, and she occasionally has classical musicians play in her garden, and she invites the whole neighborhood to sit just outside of her fence so we can hear it but not see it because we're not elite enough. But anyway, it was very nice and very interesting.
That's quite strange. So
and she sells tickets for the people the 20 or so people who are allowed into her house. But then she also prances around the outside, like giving people glasses of wine and stuff and like crackers. Very bizarre.
Hey everyone, come and see how wealthy I am.
But the music was good. It was today it was a brass quartet, I believe.
That's weird. In the town where I grew up, there's like a big sort of stately home just on the outskirts of the town, and they did music concerts there. And you could always hear it from like across the whole town, so people would just go and sit in the park and listen. But at one point, Rick Astley came to play a concert there, so like the entire town got rickrolled. It was quite amusing.
That's good.
Right, well, I've already told you a story, so I'm going to save my other story for next week. And let's move on to the football. So we're going to start this week with Juventus, who've had, I guess you could say, a bit of a mixed week. They beat Napoli 2-1 in that replay game that was cancelled due to Covid at the start of the season. And they drew in that Turin derby that we previewed in the last episode. So the question I wanted to ask here is kind of, Pirlo was saying after the Napoli win that he's learned from his mistakes and he's confident he's going to come back a better manager next season. Not sure of the exact quotes, but that was the sort of gist of it. Kenny, are we kind of buying that? Have we seen any evidence that he's made progress as a manager this season?
Well, it's kind of difficult to say. I think you were saying before we recorded, Oscar, the big problem all along has been inconsistency, and this week is a kind of prime example of that, because they were absolutely awful against Torino. Even when they were 1-0 up in that game, I was texting you guys and I was saying they're getting absolutely hammered here. Ended up coming away with, I think after Torino got the early goal in the second half, I think Juve were the more likely from then on. But overall, just like too laboured, not great. And then much better against Napoli. Deserved winners in that game, that rematch that we've been talking about since what was about match day 4 or something of the season. So from that point of view, you can't really say that there has been progress. I think you were also asking me before about whether he would be the right man for the job in the summer. Would you appoint Pirlo for next season on the basis of this season? I think on the basis of this season, you wouldn't, would you? He hasn't really shown enough to say that he is yet of a standard that a huge club like Juve, I mean huge by Italian standards, but even by European standards and hence global
and just
standards.
The players that are at the club at the moment as well.
Yeah,
the value of that squad.
But the flip side to that is that obviously, is he a better man for the job this summer than he was last summer? Undoubtedly, yes, because he's actually got some experience managing. So I don't know. It's difficult. It remains perplexing, the fact that they appointed him in the first place. I continue to stand by my conviction at the beginning that he will, I have no doubt, if he chooses to continue to pursue this career, he will no doubt become a top manager. It remains to be seen whether that is with Juventus. I think he was very close to being shown the door, despite the words of assurance from Paratici and Nedved a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it's difficult to see any progress really. But he's an intelligent man, so I'm sure he has learned a lot. And maybe once he's had a summer to put together his team, it'll be a different story.
Yeah, Boaz, when Richard Hughes was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, he said that if Pirlo was your man last summer, then he's got to still be your man this summer. Do you go along with that?
I think that kind of makes sense. We were quite shocked at the fact that Juventus were so swift to get rid of Sarri. I appreciate that he didn't connect with some of the players and a lot of the fan base, but ultimately, it's been said that time and time again, if you decide to go with a guy like Sarri, you need to commit to his methods, and it seems like Juventus aborted that project halfway through and started a whole new project with Pirlo. And while Pirlo's whole manifesto before he started was great on paper, it's been hard to see on the pitch, particularly as Juve have failed to win more than 3 games in a row, I believe. Also, after these last few games, it feels like Pirlo's professional veneer, I think I called him robotic on a past episode. He always said the exact right thing, not too much, not too little. But that also has started slipping a little bit. And earlier in the week, he had a go at the fact that Inter's game was postponed. And he kind of said, but we played with players who had COVID. And again, I mean, everyone is dealing with this whole problem. And it doesn't help to have the manager of your biggest club critique the way the league is going about things. But more to the point, he also seemed a little insecure, shall we say, about it with that quote you mentioned earlier on. To me, the manager of Juventus is shouldn't be learning on the job, but that seems a little bit ridiculous to me.
Yeah, although maybe he's learning from the Inter Milan manager who likes to give us good Conte, bad Conte. Maybe being a bit more passionate and inconsistent in his press conferences is what he needs to get performances on the pitch.
It definitely makes podcasting a lot easier for us if the managers give us instant quotes.
Yeah, right. But just back to the results that we've had, kind of what do we think this means for the race for, I guess we're talking about it as the race for second place. We'll start with you, Kenny. Who do you think is going to get second, and does it really matter, or is it just all about the Champions League places now?
Well, I would say actually this question was put to Pirlo. What would be success for you now? Are you just looking to qualify for Champions League? And he said at this stage, first place looks difficult. So yes, that would be, we'd do that and we'd look to win this mini league, as he put it, and build towards the Coppa Italia game, which they've got with Atalanta. I think undoubtedly from a financial point of view, it would mean more to Atalanta to finish second. Obviously, Milan and Juve are money-making machines off the field, obviously to different extents at the moment. But Atalanta historically don't have that. And yeah, undoubtedly the financial reward that comes with finishing second would mean more to them. As to who I kind of fancy for it, I think on current form, you've got to say that Atalanta probably, they're 2 points behind Milan, 1 point behind Juve. But Milan have been on these runs before. They went on a run for a year, basically, where they seemed unstoppable. You'd never know if that will kick back in. And also, Atalanta have a couple of pretty challenging games coming up as well. So we'll see. I would say Atalanta probably on current form are favourites for second, but that's probably more to do with the inconsistencies of Milan and Juve than it is to do with the fact that I'm convinced that Atalanta are gonna, just blow away every team that's put in front of them.
Yeah, and we're ruling Napoli out of it at this stage, or you're ruling Napoli.
I think. Yeah, for second, I think I am. What Napoli are? Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think they're 4 points off it at the moment.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean they're obviously not out of it either. But obviously, the further you go down the pecking order, the more teams there are that need to be dropping points and playing worse than you. So.
And what about you, Baz, with the Milan perspective? What does second mean to you? Are you bothered about it, or are you?
First of all, I think we should mention that I think this is maybe the third or fourth weekend where there is a potential for some narrative for Inter to slip up. There was they missed a game, so obviously they had Milan could have somehow closed the gap with a win against Sampdoria. Likewise, this has happened earlier in the season, but once again the narrative klaxon did not ring, and Juve and Milan managed to get meager draws while Inter went on to win, and now they also won the game in hand and they're off. It's pretty much sure that they've won it, and as you, it's right for you to focus on second position down. With regards to Milan, I think it's far from certainty that Milan will be second, and I think the Champions League is also at risk if they continue like this. They haven't won at home since the early February, and let's face it, this whole year so far, the performances have not been up to scratch. Probably what has happened is that long period of playing with quite so many players injured and suspensions, etc., has caught up with the squad. And even though a lot of these players are finally coming back, it's going to take some time for them to kind of start running on all cylinders again. And quite possibly, perhaps Milan were overperforming and everything was falling just right for them. As an example, the game against Sampdoria, where let's face it, Milan didn't deserve even a draw. Sampdoria is tactically, Ranieri was a sly old fox and kind of countered Milan perfectly. Ultimately, the draw is kind of a harsh result for Sampdoria, and yet Milan managed to hit the post in the 92nd minute or something. So earlier in the season, Milan would have scored that goal and we'd be talking about a hard-earned victory. But instead, we're talking about points slipped. And I think just to touch on something that you both mentioned is that I wouldn't discount anyone from Lazio, Roma, Napoli, Atalanta, because usually the top four would be quite certain by now, but everyone is quite close right now. And
yeah, I mean, you've got to discount Roma from second, really, haven't you? They're 9 points off it.
I just want to clarify that I am not actually discounting Napoli from finishing in the Champions League spot, and I'm not even saying that Milan are certain to finish in the Champions League spots. All I'm saying is that Napoli are that many places behind, and 4 points when you've only got, I think it's 9 games left. you need all of those clubs above you to be performing quite considerably worse than you. Maybe Atalanta less so because they're only 2 points ahead, but Juve and Milan both to be performing considerably worse than you. But it's very possible that one of those teams will do it and will drop out of the Champions League spot. It's very possible that Atalanta will drop out of the Champions League spots. It's very possible that Napoli will finish in the Champions League spot. That is all to play for, absolutely. But if it's purely on second place, I would say it's probably between those three.
Yeah. Just to bring it back to Milan for a second, though, Boaz, because I think probably their game against Parma this weekend is kind of the pick of the weekend games. Parma, obviously, fighting for their lives. Milan in this fight for top 4, top 2, however we want to view it. You mentioned the injury concerns. They should have a fairly strong squad for this one, shouldn't they?
There's a few niggles here and there, but overall it feels like the squad is slowly coming back to itself. Parma, of course, stole a draw in the first leg of this game at San Siro, where Milan dominated the game but somehow found themselves 2-0 down. And this is one of those matches where both clubs will do everything to win, and hopefully that will mean it will be very exciting, but maybe not one for the anyone who has a heart condition and is a fan of either club.
Yeah, fair enough. Have you got anything else that you want to talk about Milan-wise? Because if not, I've just seen the final result from Rome.
I should say that I'm going to give an honourable. It's an unscheduled honourable to Quagliarella, who, despite being passed a very silly pass from Theo Hernandez, he still had the presence of mind to chip Donnarumma, and it was, again, the move was probably not the most exciting move because of how it came about, but his technique to put it away was lovely. So, and of course, we mentioned earlier in the season that Milan were the only club that Quagliarella had never scored against in the current Serie A. So he ticks that club off his list as well, and chapeau to him.
Yeah, fair play. Lovely goal. I said there's a result from Rome. It's actually from Amsterdam. But Roma have actually nicked a last-minute winner. So 2-1 in Amsterdam, which completely changes the complexion of this section that we're about to give you. Doom and gloom.
Well, that's Roma out of the top 4 race then, surely. No, I know we're in the first leg.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just stirring.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes along with the theme of teams in that race this season of just having mixed weeks, because they were again disappointing in the league, 2-2 draw with Sassuolo, and they just look to be on a real sort of downward trajectory in the league, don't they, Buzz? I mean, like you were saying before, they've been bad against the top teams for a while, but they're dropping points all over the shop at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Roma's stats against top teams have been shocking all season. I believe it's 3 points out of 27 possible. But I think right now, playing on Thursday night really weighs on them later on in the week. Of course, that wasn't the case last weekend, but maybe their minds are slightly more on this European adventure. Who knows? I mean, the way things are going and the kind of pandemic season that this is, I wouldn't discount Roma from going all the way. Of course, they need to play the winner of Granada first they need to get past Ajax, of course. But they would have to play against the winner of Granada, Man United, I believe. And that's probably where the real challenge will come up.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be Man United, who have just beaten Granada 2-0 away in the first leg. But yeah, Kenny, I mean, you joke, but it does mean now that Roma have, I think, 3 games before they face Atalanta, one of them being that second leg against Ajax, whereas Atalanta only have a couple. Could really make the difference, couldn't it, coming towards the end of the season.
It's worth repeating that the winner of the Europa League gets a spot in the Champions League, so possibly Italy would have 5 teams next year, which would be quite good for someone who just started an Italian football podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, you would expect Atalanta would be the fresher going into that game. And I think Atalanta's problems, the reason that Atalanta probably aren't actually further up the table than they are, and I think Richard alluded to this, Richard Hughes, when he was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, just those periods where they haven't been putting the results together, the blips throughout the season. But I think those have coincided with periods where they've had European games in midweek and games at the weekend as well. And that's not unexpected for a club of Atalanta's size, because the big thing that they were trying to do this season was build out a bigger squad. Because if you remember at the end of last season, the Champions League, they were pretty much dead on their feet. The players were just absolutely... I'm trying to think for a polite way to say that they were exhausted. So yeah, this would be a situation that you would think favours Atalanta, but they've got Juve about 4 days before that on the Sunday. So yeah 4 days
Sunday
before.
as well.
Yeah, so I mean, it is still all to play for, but there's we don't see anything like with Juve. We don't see anything with Roma that suggests that they're going to translate that European form and consistency to Serie A. Maybe we'll be proved wrong.
Yeah. And last bit of news that we should mention from the Roma camp is it unfortunately looks like Zaniolo's return from injury has been delayed by 3 or 4 weeks and almost certainly going to be missing European Championships this summer.
On the plus side, I think we can answer Tifosi Down Under's question about the best front three for Italy. Although that would be assuming that we're still happy with Immobile up top. But Chiesa and Insigne will definitely be in there.
Kevin Lasagna.
Well, Lasagna on the score sheet at the weekend, so yeah, maybe he's hitting form at the right time.
If we were proper Italians, we would be scared of jinxing some sort of injury by naming this team so early. But fortunately, we don't believe in jinxing.
Yeah. Well, speaking of naming teams, it's time for us to answer Liz's question. Now, Liz sent in a question to our Scudetto, which was it last week? Was it 2 weeks ago?
It was about 3 weeks ago.
It was a while ago.
I know when it was, and I'm ashamed to say when it was, and it wasn't. It was more than 3 weeks ago.
It might have been the first episode of March, not April. But a couple of weeks ago, we spent the entire pre-production hour just making this 11, and then we forgot to actually present it.
What's the premise?
So the premise, I haven't explained it at all, and no one's going to remember because it was so long ago. So basically, we had to come up with a starting 11 of players who played in Serie A, the best starting 11, but you can only have one player from each club.
It was very tricky. I should also add that there were 2 weeks where you were off ill with scurvy on this.
Scurvy.
The only reason he was off is because he didn't want to do this time.
So yeah, it was a very, very tricky. It was a very, very tricky task. And actually, we look at the team that we've got, and Boaz said before we started recording, that's a rubbish team.
Is Kevin Lasagna in it?
I forgot.
We'll get to it.
He's not.
He was definitely nominated by me several times.
So we had players like Lukaku in there. We spoke about like all of the big guys that really should be the first names on the team sheet. But what we actually came up with was Donnarumma in goal for Milan. We had Manolas and Romero at centre back, so representing Napoli and Atalanta. We had Hakimi at right back for Inter, Spinazzola from Roma at left back, Locatelli in a defensive midfield role from Sassuolo, and then we had Rodrigo De Paul and Luis Alberto, Udinese and Lazio accordingly. And then we had Orsolini right of the front three, and that was largely because he was with all of the best players from the best teams used up. We couldn't find a right forward, and we had
on the team sheet.
Then we had Cristiano Ronaldo because you kind of got to really. He comes in for stick, but he's still one of the greatest footballers of our generation. And Vlahovic up front, because we couldn't shoehorn in Lukaku. And yeah,
if I'm not mistaken, there's no Verona player, so Oscar's dream of having Kevin Lasagna in the team is still very possible.
Kevin Lasagna is on the bench. Yeah. He's the one player on the bench.
First name on the bench.
Claudio Ranieri from Sampdoria, obviously, is our manager, just because you've got to love a little bit of dilly ding dilly dong.
Perfect.
Indeed.
So send in your questions and we'll respond 6 weeks later.
I don't think that's too bad a team. I think it would finish top half.
Yeah, I have a problem with the right attacking area, but it's hard once you picked Hakimi for Inter or Donnarumma for Milan, or once. I mean, it's a big task.
You got Cristiano Ronaldo for Juve, so you can't have Chiesa.
I reckon with Ranieri as manager, that would probably finish above Pirlo's Juve.
It'll definitely be for the fight for the second spot.
Ronaldo would score 30 goals in that team.
The question is, does Ronaldo exist for Juventus if he's also playing for this fictional side?
Yeah, good question. And we'll address that in 6 weeks' time, because now we need to do good week, bad week, which, as I already mentioned, is very difficult this week because no one's really had that good or that bad a week except for Inter, and we didn't want to give it to Inter again.
We can't just keep giving it to Inter. That's the problem. It would just be good week Inter, bad week Milan and Juve every week at the moment.
So, for good week, I think we're going to go with Atalanta, aren't we, Kenny? Can you tell us a little bit about their week?
Yeah, so it's more to do with the teams around them, I think, than anything else. No team at the bottom has really pulled themselves out of any imminent danger. Inter, as we said, we can't just keep giving it to them. And if you look at that top, that challenge for the Champions League spots, Atalanta and Lazio are the only teams that haven't dropped points, so have kind of strengthened their positions. Lazio, Simone Inzaghi obviously has tested positive for COVID, and they also had 2 players sent off. So I think by process of elimination, good week has to go to Atalanta.
And in addition, Papu Gomez is quoted as saying that it's really hard for him to watch Atalanta's games because his heart is still in Bergamo. And I think if you're an Atalanta fan, there's nothing better than an ex-lover whose heart is still yearning for you.
Yeah, I think Atalanta's fans' hearts are still yearning for Papu as well, to be honest. It's I don't think there's too much bitterness. I think he's still very, very much loved.
Fair enough. And for bad week, and this one was probably even more difficult, but we've gone for Cagliari because they dropped points in a game which against Verona, admittedly a very hard game, but if they want to stay up, it's the kind of games they need to be doing a bit better in. And if they do get relegated, we wanted to give them a bad week before they do. So sorry, guys.
And we've also mentioned in the past that with the kind of squad that they have, there is no way they should be so low in the table.
Yeah. And a point further away from safety, because obviously Torino picked up that point against Juve.
Yeah, it was a bad week indeed. And speaking of bad weeks, we've got to do a bit of a COVID update. So this is on the Italy COVID crisis. We've just got a bit more detail now that 19 out of the 80 people who travelled with the Italian national team came back positive. It seems like quite a lot of people to be travelling with the squad, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand who all these people were. I know it was an extended squad, so yeah. Anyways, 19 out of 80 people is almost 25%, and that's spreading. It's 8 players who have caught it, and there's also, as we mentioned last week, the Sassuolo players who were not fielded as a precaution. This is the kind of scenario that the COVID football presents until the players get vaccinated, I suppose.
Yeah, and on this topic, what do we think of the suggestion that there should be bigger squads for the Euros? The Italian FA has been kind of pushing for this. I mean, on the one hand, it could mean more people travelling, like, the associated staff.
And Kevin Lasagna.
But on the upside, it could mean Kevin Lasagna gets in the squad. So what do you think about this?
I'm all for it. I'm all for it. It makes sense. It's pragmatic. I've been saying all along when people have been pushing for games to be played where there was really no reason to play them, where people have been complaining about games being suspended when half of a team, games being postponed when half of a team is, testing positive for COVID, that you have to be pragmatic, you have to be flexible. This seems like a very sensible proposal to me.
The only thing that worries me is that when you have a squad of 23 to 28 players, you have 80 staff around you. How many staff would you have to bring with 30 players? Do you have to increase everything exponentially? But overall, I think it's a good idea. Presumably, some of these players would be on standby, like you are in just before a tournament, or like in the World Cup when, for example, Gaza was dropped. So I think, it doesn't seem like such a big pain for anyone involved. You tell your caputos or whatever, look, man, don't put your shoes away for the summer because we may need you.
Yeah, I guess if they're actually staying at home. I was just thinking it could actually be a significant number of people across, if every squad has an additional 2 players. But maybe you're right. Maybe if they're just on standby, then definitely there's no argument against it that I can think of.
At the same time, you can't have like 20 people on standby. That would get a bit ridiculous if you have like the 5th choice keeper like not going on holiday, just waiting for the call.
I'll happily delay my holiday. So let's move on to the honourables and dishonourables. Kenny, do you want to kick us off with your obligatory goals honourable?
Yeah, well, there's an obvious standout, which is Daniele Verde for his incredible bicycle kick for Spezia against Lazio. Just absolutely textbook bicycle kick in off the crossbar, I think, as well. Top corner, just the sort of thing that kids practice over and over and over and over and never manage it. So that absolute standout, goals honourable. The other one I'm going to give to Traore for his goal for Sassuolo against the Inter. Again, both of my honourable goals are for goals for the losing side in 2-1 results.
Glorious defeats, Kenny. It's what you sign up for as a Spurs fan, and probably as an Atalanta fan as well.
And certainly as a St Mirren fan, yes. But just really, really lovely. Half volley just as it bounces, I think, on the way up. Side foots it, curls it into the top corner. Just really, really nice. Lovely technique and a very attractive goal to look at as well. So that's my goals honourables.
And just to touch on Daniele Verdi, it's nice to see his name being brought up again because earlier in the season he was one of the forerunners for the Gagliardini Challenge, managing to hit the post from about 50 centimeters outside of the goal. It would have been a shame if that was all that he was remembered for.
Yeah. On the topic of players that score spectacular goals, Baz, one of the leaders in the honourable mentions leaderboard is in for another one.
Well, this is I didn't even nominate him in this occasion, but our man Antivirus is getting an honourable mention. Antivirus is a new character in the upcoming Asterix and Obelix movie, and the person who's going to play him is Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I'm not sure why, but fair enough. Let's go for it. He joins Michael Schumacher, Zinedine Zidane, and Tony Parker, and Amélie Mauresmo as sports stars who have starred in Asterix movie. And Antivirus doesn't sound like a name from the Asterix and Obelix era, but I guess thank God I'm not writing this script.
Yeah, not a lot more to say about that, really.
He gets to dust off his French as well, I guess.
For sure. I guess they've modernised it in some way. Looking forward to not watching that. Kenny, it looks like you've got another goals honourable here.
It's not really a goal honourable. I mean, it's for Dybala. It's not really for the goal itself, although it was a lovely goal. Dybala's obviously had an absolutely horrific time of it. He got COVID badly. It really obviously impacted the start of his season. Then was out with long-term injury. Then had the whole dinner/party escapade at the McKennie residence, which is probably best in the history books. But yeah, so he came on in Juve's victory over Napoli, scored what ultimately proved to be the decisive goal. Lovely finish, but it was more for the fact that it's just the comeback, the story really, the comeback of Dybala, the great finish, the fact that the entire squad raced to celebrate with him, including, I believe, Szczesny, who was warming up or something 85 yards away, apparently ran the length of the field to celebrate with him. So just a really nice story, and it's easy to forget how important Dybala was to Juve last season in them winning that 9th title in a row. And I really, really thought that was any question marks about his place in this Juve team put to bed once and for all. I thought he'd kick on, but he's had horrible luck, and it's great to see him back because he's an absolutely wonderful footballer and seems like a really nice and intelligent guy as well.
And to further emphasize his importance to Juve, even just this season, he's featured in only 12 games, but Juve averaged 2.3 points per game in these matches, whereas in the 17 matches that he missed, Juve averaged 1.8 points per game. So that's a significant difference. And I mean, he has played 12 games against 17 that he hasn't, but out of those 12 games, none were losses. Clearly, he's a vital member of that squad and probably a little bit underappreciated by the fan base.
Absolutely, it could be key next season. Oh, I've got dishonourable now. And just to follow on from my dishonourable last week for the new Inter badge, I have to give a dishonourable to the new Inter kit. Is it the third or fourth kit, actually?
So it's the fourth kit, but it is, the latest I've read is that it's unlikely to be approved by Serie A because there were rules in the league that limit the number of colours in a top.
I thought you were going to say because it's too disgusting.
It does look like, the way I describe it, the way I describe it is it looks like Kandinsky had food poisoning, basically.
That's a very good description. I was going to say it looks like a cross between 3 different Tour de France cycling tops.
Yeah, it's an abomination. Let's be blunt.
Check it out, or actually don't check it out. Save yourself.
Chuck it out.
Chuck it out.
Knowing Inter, this is just a ploy to have more people against them so that they can build that us against them spirit even more.
You know what, though? There's something has to be said for the amount of time that people speak about Inter. I mean, the marketing team are doing an absolutely top job. First of all, they had that ridiculous not for everyone slogan. Then they had the I am thing that they came out with, marketing spiel that they came out with. Now they've got this, they have the badge, which coincided with the I am. They've got this disgusting top. I mean, they've got a way of keeping them in the, in the gossip. So maybe that's the whole point.
When you're Inter, like, what would their marketing team have to do for people not to speak about them? Like, how could they do a bad job?
Not pay the salaries for a few months.
Ooh.
Oh, they did that and didn't matter.
Like, if we're saying that by designing a bad shirt, they've done it, I guess they could do something quite bland, maybe. All right, anyway, enough about Inter, because we're just proving their point. Kenny, you want to talk about Simi?
Yeah, honourable mention for Simi, who has now got 8 goals in his last 5 games, and between the 3rd of March and the 3rd of April, he scored more goals than any other player across Europe's top 5 leagues. So I think that is definitely deserving of an honourable mention.
That's impressive playing for Crotone, considering they don't score that many goals.
Absolutely.
Fair play to him. And Boaz, on the topic of goal scorers, I guess we have to give this man another one.
Yeah, we have to give an honorable mention to my good friend and frequent pod listener, Cristiano Ronaldo, who got 25 goals or more in the 11th season out of the last 12, more or less. Again, his personal record cannot be disputed. And yet, I would also like to give him a dishonorable mention because he knew that, with the exception of maybe the Coppa Italia, he might not win a trophy this year, and that would be really bad. And so he heard about this thing called the Living La Vida Loca challenge, and there was a perfect cross, and you expect Ronaldo to score headers quite easily, but he kind of flinched, missed the ball, and then kicked the goal, and then stared at the post like the post was starting a fight with him in a bar.
Maybe it was just a celebration of winning the Vida Loca award, like that post kick.
Maybe that is how you celebrate winning this award.
Just triumphant.
The thing that was so spectacular about this one was that he was only about 3 yards out as well. Completely unmarked, completely free header on a plate.
I have a theory. Because usually he's known for like these incredibly high jumps for his headers, whereas this ball was quite low. And I think he was just like, nah, this doesn't look spectacular enough.
Yeah, maybe that was it. Maybe he had to make it more spectacular by completely fresh airing it.
Yeah, it was a spectacular celebration. Anyway, that's all we've got time for this week. If you don't already, please do subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your audio. We'll speak to you again next week. Until then, enjoy the football.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. La Juventus è campione d'Italia questa data, il 6 maggio.
Del anticipo, la Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2000-2001.